Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Diane follows suit after Sally conceals a secret from Billy. Diane Jenkins Abbott is compelled to comply, while Sally Spectre will conceal a secret from Billy Abbott. To begin with, Sally will choose to take a risk behind Billy's back. When Sally calls Jill Abbott to make a pitch over video chat, Billy won't know what she's doing. Sally will acknowledge that she has an issue with Jill's son, but she will also reveal that she is in love with him. Sally might then go on to describe how Billy messed everything up with Jack Abbott after putting his trust in Kane Ashby. Sally might question whether Jill would be prepared to fund Abbott Communications since Jack won't return the money. Although Sally might believe it's feasible if they can work things out, Jill may have severe doubts that Bill would accept anything from her. In any event, Sally will be aware that Billy, who clearly still harbors a profound affection for his mother, has suffered as a result of all this conflict. Regardless of what transpires with Abbott Communications, it would be beneficial for all parties if Jill and Billy could somehow mend their mother-son relationship. With Sally's impending request and Jack pressuring her to visit Kane's agenda, Jill will have good cause to return to Genoa City. Although Jill will be returning to GC in person later this week, from September 29th to October 3rd, YNR fans are accustomed to seeing her on video calls. Meanwhile, after Victor Newman and Jack Abbott come to a risky arrangement, Nikki Newman will clash with Diane. Diane may still harbor misgivings about this collaboration, but Nikki will make her comply and acknowledge that it is taking place. Despite her personal concerns, Nikki will continue to believe that Jack and Victor's cooperation will offer them the best chance to defeat Kane. Kate Fairbanks' character Tessa Porter will jump to her own defense. Tessa will be motivated to get the truth since she believes that the only way to save her marriage is to investigate the entire situation at Mariah Copeland's former hotel. Although Sharon Newman isn't certain that Tessa should start looking into it straight away, Tessa will believe it's essential and might even say Daniel Romalotti Jr. will support her. Diane Jenkins Abbott found herself in a place she never thought she would be again, backed into a corner, forced to comply with someone else's terms rather than setting her own, her every move tied to the ripple effects of the volatile choices swirling around Genoa City. It wasn't that Diane didn't know how to manipulate, maneuver, and hold her own against the most formidable players in town. She had been a survivor for decades, navigating betrayal, reinvention, and resurrection, but this particular web of complications felt different. This time, it wasn't entirely about her own schemes but about the fallout of Sally Spectre's secretive maneuvering and the dangerous tightrope Sally walked when she decided to conceal something crucial from Billy Abbott. The spark was lit when Sally, restless and determined to carve out a piece of control in a situation spiraling beyond her grasp, chose to act behind Billy's back. She knew it was a gamble, but she also knew that waiting for Billy to come around or to manage things in his unpredictable, sometimes reckless way could mean disaster. So, without hesitation, she picked up her phone, set up a video call, and reached out to Jill Abbott directly, a bold move that would not only test her own loyalties but also unravel old scars between Jill and Billy in ways neither expected. On that call, Sally projected confidence, masking the nervous energy that hummed beneath her surface as she laid out her pitch. Jill, sharp-eyed and discerning as always, immediately caught on to the urgency behind Sally's words, and Sally could feel the weight of her scrutiny. Sally admitted candidly that she had issues with Jill's son, but instead of disguising her emotions, she leaned into her truth, confessing that she was in love with Billy, that her connection to him had become something raw, undeniable, and complicated. That honesty alone startled Jill, who wasn't used to hearing people bare their feelings so bluntly when business and family dynamics intertwined. But Sally went further, pressing into sensitive territory by pointing out how Billy had sabotaged his bond with Jack Abbott when he misplaced his trust in Kane Ashby. It wasn't just about Billy's judgment, it was about the reverberations of his mistakes and how they tied into the financial instability of Abbott Communications. Sally dared to ask the question no one else had, whether Jill, despite her doubts, would consider funding Abbott Communications in the absence of Jack's support. It was audacious, perhaps reckless, but Sally knew Jill had always had a complicated soft spot for her son and, despite her skepticism, might not be able to resist the possibility of stepping in if it meant helping Billy regain footing. Sally also knew Jill's hesitation would run deep. After all, Jill had spent years watching Billy self-destruct, watching him leap into ventures with passion but without caution, only to crash and burn. Still, Sally believed she could sway Jill, if not entirely with business logic, then with the argument that repairing Abbott Communications could serve as a bridge to repairing Jill's fractured relationship with Billy. Jill, for all her steel and stubbornness, had to know how deeply Billy still longed for his mother's approval, how profoundly the fissures in their bond weighed on him. Even if Jill rejected the idea outright, the seed would be planted, and Sally hoped that in the quiet moments afterward, Jill would replay the conversation, wonder about what healing could look like, and eventually decide to re-enter Genoa City's orbit. And indeed, Jill's mind began to turn, especially with Jack Abbott breathing down her neck to confront Kane's latest schemes. The convergence of Sally's pitch and Jack's demands made Jill's return to Genoa City not only inevitable but necessary, giving Sally the small victory of knowing she had set something in motion that could shake the family to its core. But Sally's secretive call was not without consequences. Billy, blissfully unaware, carried on without knowing that the woman he trusted had gone behind his back. When he found out, because secrets always had a way of clawing their way to the surface in Genoa City, the betrayal would cut him in ways Sally hadn't fully considered. Billy prided himself on loyalty, even when he struggled to maintain it himself, and discovering Sally's duplicity could reopen wounds of distrust that had defined so many of his failed relationships. Meanwhile, in a separate but connected storm, the unlikely alliance between Victor Newman and Jack Abbott simmered with both promise and peril. They were titans, adversaries who had built legacies on outmaneuvering one another, yet now they found themselves staring down a common enemy in Kane Ashby. This dangerous collaboration did not sit easily with everyone, least of all Diane, who still wrestled with her doubts about Jack binding himself to Victor's agenda. Nikki Newman, fiercely protective of her husband and ever suspicious of Diane, took it upon herself to confront Diane directly. Their clash was inevitable, two women with strong wills, standing on opposite sides of trust and suspicion. Nikki, with her sharp tongue and commanding presence, made it clear that Diane had no choice but to accept the partnership between Jack and Victor. Whether she liked it or not, it was happening, and Diane would have to fall in line. Diane's reluctance was palpable, but even she had to concede that, despite her personal misgivings, the alliance might indeed be their best chance at stopping Kane before he tightened his grip on their lives. While the Abbotts and Newmans tangled themselves in business wars and uneasy alliances, another battle brewed on the personal front. Tessa Porter, played with vulnerability and fire by Kate Fairbanks, found herself under scrutiny. Rumors, suspicions, and the unrelenting strain of marriage under pressure pushed her to the brink, and she realized the only way to salvage her relationship with Mariah Copeland was to confront the truth head-on. Her determination grew sharper when she uncovered unsettling hints that the answers she sought might be tied to the very hotel Mariah once called home. It was a risky path, one Sharon Newman urged her to consider carefully. Sharon, always the voice of reason, cautioned Tessa that diving headfirst into such murky territory could stir more trouble than resolution. But Tessa's heart told her otherwise. If she wanted to save her marriage, if she wanted Mariah to see her not as a burden but as a partner willing to fight for them, she had to act. She declared her intent to investigate, no matter the cost, and even hinted that Daniel Romalotti Jr. would stand by her, offering his support in ways Sharon hadn't expected. This tangled subplot underscored the broader theme playing out across Genoa City: love, loyalty, and survival were all being tested, and the lines between secrecy and truth blurred more with each passing day. For Diane, the echoes of Sally's choices haunted her more than she cared to admit. Sally's secret might have been a personal maneuver, but the ripple effects forced Diane into compliance in her own world, tethered her fate to Jack's decisions, and reignited Nikki's distrust. In a city where every alliance was fragile, every secret a ticking time bomb, and every relationship a battlefield, Diane recognized that she was once again at the mercy of the people around her. Yet beneath her compliance simmered a dangerous truth: Diane Jenkins Abbott was not a woman who stayed silent or subservient for long. The storm was gathering, and when it finally broke, no one in Genoa City would escape unscathed. When the truth finally seeped into Billy Abbott's world, it did so like a slow-moving poison, the kind that doesn't kill right away but burns through trust until nothing remains untouched, and the discovery that Sally Spectra had called Jill behind his back without even the courtesy of warning him sent him reeling in ways he hadn't expected, because while Billy had endured betrayal before, by lovers, by friends, by business partners, the sting this time carried an intimacy that shook him to his core, not only because Sally had been the one to do it but because the very nature of her secret cut into his deepest insecurities about his mother, about being perpetually overshadowed, misunderstood, and doubted by Jill, the one person he had always longed to prove himself to but never quite could, and as Billy stood there, absorbing the details of Sally's maneuvering, he felt that old, familiar ache return, the sense that he was once again a pawn in someone else's game, a player in a narrative he had no control over. And in his anger he lashed out not just at Sally but at the tangled mess of his own family's legacy, venting to Jack, accusing him of pushing him too hard, of judging him too harshly, of never quite believing in him the way he believed in others, all while Sally, her own defenses rising, tried to explain that she hadn't done it to betray him but to save him, to give him a fighting chance at rebuilding Abbott Communications when no one else seemed willing to take that risk, and though her words carried conviction, they did little to soothe the raw wound Billy felt. Because what hurt most was not that she had acted but that she hadn't trusted him enough to include him in her plan, that she had assumed he couldn't handle it, that she had made the choice for him, just as Jill had so many times before, and that realization left him spiraling between rage and heartbreak, unable to decide whether to push Sally away for good or cling to her as the one person bold enough to fight for him even when he wouldn't fight for himself. Jill's sudden return to Genoa City only added fuel to the fire, her presence like a storm cloud hovering over the Abbott estate, and though she tried to frame it as a business trip, as a practical effort to evaluate what Sally had proposed and what Jack demanded, everyone knew her arrival carried a deeper agenda, to confront her son, to challenge him yet again, and perhaps, if the walls came down long enough, to heal some of the fractures that had defined their bond for decades, but old habits die hard. And no sooner had she stepped into the house than Billy's defenses shot up, his tone sharp, his bitterness spilling out as he accused her of always meddling, always undermining, always treating him as the wayward child rather than the capable man he wanted to be, and Jill, never one to shy away from a fight, fired back with her own barbs, pointing out his failures, his recklessness, his inability to follow through, and though beneath the shouting there was a sliver of love, an unspoken plea for understanding, it was buried beneath layers of resentment, and Sally, caught in the middle, could only watch as the two people she cared about most tore each other apart. Jack, meanwhile, tried to play mediator, urging both Billy and Jill to see reason, but his own patience wore thin, especially when Billy dredged up the past with Kane Ashby, reopening old wounds that Jack would have preferred to keep buried, and soon the family drama began to bleed into the larger battle with Victor, who had little patience for Abbott's squabbles when the real threat, in his eyes, was Kane's unchecked ambition. Victor Newman, for all his ruthless determination, understood that Kane was not a man to underestimate, and though he had agreed to partner with Jack in this fight, he grew increasingly irritated by the distractions, Billy's temper tantrums, Jill's reappearance, Diane's skepticism, because he knew Kane was using every moment of hesitation, every ounce of division, to tighten his grip on power, and Victor, pragmatic as ever, warned Jack that if the Abbotts couldn't get their house in order, he would have no choice but to act alone, a threat that sent shivers through Diane, who could already see the fallout that would come if Victor unleashed his full fury without restraint. Nikki, watching from the sidelines but never truly silent, pressed her husband to stay the course, reminding him that even if Diane didn't trust the alliance, it was their best shot at cutting Kane down to size, and Diane, though resentful of Nikki's high-handedness, ultimately bit her tongue, realizing that her objections, however valid, would only isolate her further from Jack if she refused to comply. While the battle lines at the top grew sharper, Tessa Porter pursued her own truth with a determination that surprised even herself, driven by the gnawing fear that her marriage to Mariah Copeland might collapse if she didn't act, and though Sharon tried to caution her, to remind her that not every answer would bring healing, Tessa pressed forward with her investigation at the hotel, uncovering threads that hinted at secrets long buried, secrets that not only touched her and Mariah but connected in strange, unexpected ways to the very schemes Cain had been weaving, and when she confided in Daniel Romalotti Jr., his promise to support her only strengthened her resolve, giving her the courage to chase leads others dismissed as dead ends. Yet the deeper she dug, the more Tessa realized that the truth she sought might not only test her marriage but place her directly in Cain's path, a dangerous position that could make her a target if she wasn't careful, and though she braced herself for the fallout, she knew she couldn't turn back, not when so much was at stake. In the midst of it all, Diane found herself reflecting on the precarious balance she was forced to maintain, compelled to follow suit with decisions she didn't fully endorse, her instincts warning her that every compromise made in the name of temporary unity could one day come back to haunt them, but also aware that to resist too openly would alienate Jack, whose trust she had worked tirelessly to rebuild. The irony wasn't lost on her, that she, once the architect of so many schemes, now had to be the one to acquiesce, to bend in order to stay in the game, but she also knew that survival sometimes required patience, and if Sally's gamble had taught her anything, it was that acting in secret carried both risk and reward, a lesson Diane tucked away as she prepared herself for the battle still to come. For Genoa City, after all, was a place where secrets never stayed buried, where alliances shifted with the wind, and where love, betrayal, and ambition danced in a perpetual cycle, drawing everyone into its storm. And so, as Billy wrestled with his fury, as Sally clung to hope that he would understand, as Jill questioned whether she could ever truly mend her bond with her son, as Jack and Victor tightened their alliance, as Nikki and Diane sparred beneath the surface, and as Tessa risked everything for the truth, the stage was set for explosions that no one could contain, a reminder that in this town, the moment you thought you were in control was often the moment everything unraveled. The confrontation between Jill Abbott and her son, Billy, grew heavier with each passing moment, layered with years of unspoken grievances, parental disappointment, and the endless cycle of defiance and reconciliation that had defined their relationship since Billy was old enough to push back against her control, and as they stood in the Abbott living room with Sally hovering nervously nearby, it was as if time folded in on itself, bringing forward every past argument, every slammed door, every bitter word that had ever been exchanged between mother and son, leaving no room for civility, only raw emotion. Billy, his voice trembling with both fury and pain, accused Jill of never truly believing in him, of treating him like the family failure, the spare part in a house full of overachievers, the son who could never measure up to her expectations, and while his accusations cut deep, Jill refused to let herself crumble, instead firing back with the brutal honesty that had always been her trademark. She reminded him of his reckless decisions, of the countless times she had bailed him out of messes he created, of the way he always seemed to crave independence until the moment things went wrong, when suddenly he wanted her help but also resented her for giving it. The words struck Billy like blows, each one hitting a nerve he thought he had numbed long ago, and though his instinct was to turn and walk away, to avoid letting her see just how much she could still hurt him, he stayed rooted in place, glaring at her with the stubbornness she herself had passed down to him. Sally tried to interject, tried to remind them that her call to Jill wasn't meant to deepen the divide but to bridge it, to show that Billy wasn't as alone as he felt, but her words were drowned out by the storm between mother and son, each too entrenched in their own wounds to hear anything beyond the sound of their own voices. Jack, standing off to the side, looked on with weary eyes, torn between his instinct to protect Billy and his understanding that this confrontation was long overdue, that perhaps the only way for Jill and Billy to ever move forward was to rip open the old scars and let the bleeding begin again. Diane, meanwhile, watched with her own quiet apprehension, knowing that family battles like this were the most dangerous of all, because unlike corporate wars or strategic alliances, these were personal, and personal wounds left marks that lasted long after the shouting stopped. As Jill's voice cracked, betraying the softer emotions she tried to keep hidden, she admitted something that startled everyone in the room, that she wasn't angry because Billy had failed her, she was angry because she had failed him, because somewhere along the line she had let her ambition and her relentless need for control blind her to the fact that her son needed more than criticism, that he needed unconditional belief, the kind she had given so freely to others but struggled to extend to him. The confession hung in the air, heavy and raw, and for the first time, Billy saw the woman in front of him not as the unshakable matriarch but as a mother burdened by regret, by choices she wished she could take back, and though part of him wanted to embrace that moment, to let it soften his anger, another part resisted, terrified that if he let her back in, she would only hurt him again. His silence spoke louder than words, a silence that pressed on Sally's heart, because she understood too well what it meant to crave approval from a parent who seemed incapable of giving it, and in that silence, she made a choice to step closer, to take Billy's hand in hers, a gesture that reminded him he wasn't as alone as he felt. Yet even that simple act was fraught with complication, because in Jill's eyes, Sally was both a lifeline and a threat, someone who loved her son but also someone who had gone behind his back, someone who could either steady him or drag him deeper into the chaos that always seemed to follow him. Jill's protective instincts flared, and though she had moments earlier confessed her regret, she shifted quickly into warning mode, cautioning Billy not to let Sally's influence blind him to reality, not to mistake passion for partnership, and those words only deepened the wedge, because Billy, already raw from her disapproval, now felt as though she was trying to sabotage the one relationship that mattered most to him. The tension escalated until Sally, her patience frayed, snapped back at Jill, defending her love for Billy with a fiery conviction that startled even herself, insisting that she wasn't there to break him down but to lift him up, that she had made mistakes but only because she cared enough to take risks on his behalf when no one else would. The outburst silenced the room, leaving Jill and Billy staring at her with a mix of shock and reluctant respect, and though it didn't solve anything outright, it forced them all to acknowledge that Sally was not going anywhere, not now, not when the stakes were this high.